Welcome back to NTV Weekend Edition. Between the 1st and 11th of November 2021, more than 100 pupils were arrested for their involvement in school unrest. According to a Ministry of Education report, 41 students have already been charged in court for arson and property destruction, while other cases are being handled by school disciplinary committees. Some incidents have resulted in students being admitted to hospital due to injuries sustained during the fracas. NTV's Ruth Saramwe met with several stakeholders in the education system, including students, as she highlights some of Kenya's tragic school arson incidents. Some of the images in this special feature, we want to warn you, may be unsettling.
On October 31st, 2021, all hell broke loose at Nairobi's Buruburu Girls High School as a fire broke out in one of the cubicles. The piercing sounds of ambulance sirens filled the air as mayhem rocked the school compound as teachers, support staff, students and paramedics rushed to assist injured students into vehicles as they were taken to hospital.
Principal alikuwa ametumiwa letters akiambiwa kama tutaenda half term shule itachomeka.
Yeye alikuwa entertainment, kaniambia waliona tu moshi.
Kerugoya, Maranda, Kakamega, Kanjuri and Kiaridhaini secondary schools are among those that have experienced fires.
There is need for each school to sit down and look at what they are doing about their situation. The fact that your school is not burning today does not mean you are okay.
Pressure from the packed academic calendar, overcrowding in schools, bad blood between school administration and students, poor parenting and peer pressure are some of the reasons linked to the growing wave of unrest in schools. However, even though some have gone up in flames, might this be a symptom of a far larger problem within our education system?
Incidences of fire unrests are not new in the country. And in the last 1 month, learning has been disrupted in more than 20 institutions due to fire outbreaks, and some have seen students being admitted in hospital due to injuries they encountered. Today, we go down memory lane as we highlight the most tragic arson attack in Kenya's history. We ask ourselves, are there lessons that we can learn?
These were the charred remains of a fire that destroyed the 130 capacity dormitory at Changuli Secondary School in Machakos on March 25th, 2001. The early morning tragedy killed 67 students. Many were burnt beyond recognition. Hilary and Stella Kitata are among the families who lost their children in the devastating fire. They were both oblivious of the incident that had spread like wildfire across the country's airwaves.
I was called from my office in Nairobi early in the morning by the secretary, Changuli Secondary. She told me I should go to school because there was something she wanted to tell me. So I was getting consolation from people, yet I didn't know what had happened.
Back at home, Stella had just left for work as a teacher in a nearby school in the Changuli area when a co-worker broke the news. She left immediately for school.
Lango kuu alikuwa limefunguliwa. Watu walikuwa waking'ang'ana kusukuma wafunguliwe, lakini lilikuwa limefungwa. Kwa bahati nzuri, mzazi mmoja ambaye alikuwa na mtoto kwa hiyo shule akafika akiwa kwa gari. Akafunguliwa yeye akaingia, na sisi wenye tulikuwa hatuna gari tukafungiwa tu nje. Watu walipoona hivyo wakasema sio vizuri, wakasukuma mlango mpaka gate ikaanguka na tukaingia ndani.
What they saw was devastating because the dormitory was still burning. And there was smell of human flesh all over the school compound. And it was chaotic that time.
Watu wa Red Cross walikuwa tayari washafika, wakaeka miili kwa mifuko. Na ilikuwa imechomeka beyond recognition. Hata ungejua kama ni mtu ama ni makaa. Na there were pieces ya miili ambayo ilichukuliwa ikaekwa kwa hizo mabags. Zikiwa tu pieces na bones.
Despair filled the air as tens of parents anxiously searched for their children at the Machakos Level 5 hospital and within the school compound, still hoping they were still alive.
Nilikuwa tu nangoja mtoto akuje. Nilikuwa nikifikiria pengine amekimbia, akiongopa na atarudi.
This, like other fires, including recent attacks on schools, is believed to have been started by two boys.
They had gone to their administration. They said they wanted to talk to them, but the administration was undermined. I mean, they dismissed them off. They didn't want to listen to them. It was alleged that they sneaked through the gate, went to a petrol station in Machakos. The jerrycans, they bought petrol. When they came, they doused the dormitories when the boys were dead asleep. Because the dormitory was burned in the wee hours of, early in the morning. So at that time, everybody is totally asleep. I mean, even if there is fire, you are not conscious enough to make your escape if there is danger.
Hiyo weekend, shule ichomeke.
The months that followed were difficult for the Kitatas as they were for other parents who had also lost their children in the fire.
Nilikuwa tu nikiongea peke yangu, nikisikia mlango ukishikwa hivi. Nafikiria ni mtoto wangu amekuja. Usiku nikilala, naota nikiitwa, ninaitika na ninatoka, ninafungua mlango, ninamfungulia ingie, lakini hakuna.
Kitata Kilu, a 13-year-old, had just joined Form 1, determined to pursue a bright future for himself. The last time he saw his family at their home in Machakos, just a few kilometers from school, was during the half-term break. He never returned home to his parents. For 20 years now, Kilu's remains are among other 58 students whose bodies were interred in this mass grave. Their bodies could not be identified.
Mimi nikisikia watu wamechoma, silali. Hata naanza kulia. Vile niliona hiyo ya Buruburu, ni wasichana wakiruka kutoka huko juu mpaka chini, na ingine wamechoma kila kitu, ni vitanda tu. Nafikiria kama kungekuwa na wanafunzi, pia wao wangechomeka.
When these recurrent fire instances start happening, especially in the second term, sometimes we don't get it that lightly. We don't, because this school has an history. When the school dormitory was burnt,
On the eve of November 2021, students at the Buruburu Girls' School were going about their routine Sunday afternoon activities until they were interrupted by the sight of smoke.
Hiyo siku tulikuanga field, tulikuwa entertainment. Alafu tulikuwa tu tuna have fun, tulikuwa in groups. So tukaona moshi kitoka kwa dom, tukadismiss, tukadhani ni wanachoma takataka. Ndo moshi katoka mingi, tukaenda, tukaona ni kimoja inachomeka, kila mtu akaanza kupanic.
The situation was worsened by a viral video showing girls jumping off the multi-story building in an attempt to save their lives from the choking fumes that spread quickly throughout the dormitory. The escape routes were inaccessible at the time. As fellow students explored ways to save their classmates, word of the fire had reached some parents, and others had already arrived at the school gate.
Wakati tulifika hapa, watu walikuwa wengi sana, alafu watu walikuwa yani wazazi walikuwa na ile kilio. Juu ambulance zinaingia zinatoka, hujui kama zinatoa watoto wako hai ama watoto wamekufa, hujui kama mtoto wako wako hapo ndani. So ilikuwa kitu ya kustua sana.
Some are parents, others are not parents. Others are even drunk. So how shall we take care of the girls?
As the school administration tried to reassure the worried parents who had come to inquire about their children's condition, the school compound was filled with confusion and commotion since the incident had frightened over 1,000 girls.
Form 4 tunafaa karibu tufanye KCSE na shule inachomeka. We don't have peace. Principal aongeleshwe kabisa juu isi fair. Form 4 hawana time ya kusoma na ndio shule inachomeka.
59 injured girls were admitted to the hospital, while 30 others were treated and released after suffering minor injuries. Jemima Ouro's daughter was among those who jumped off the story building, and she was fortunate to escape unharmed.
Yeye alikuwa entertainment, kaniambia waliona tu moshi. Akashika kasichana kingine, kimbia lakini yeye hakuokoa zake. Wangu aliokoa at least bagi yake. Ile moshi ilikuwa inanini sana. Wakaona wacha wapitie kwa dirisha. Wakaniambia waliwekewa mattress za wale form 4 wenye waliendanga. Wakawekewa hizi mattress chini, walikuwa naambiwa ruka.
A few hours before the 5 p.m. incident, the girls held a forum with the school principal in which they addressed pressing issues in the hope of finding solutions.
Hiyo Sunday wenye watu walitoka church, tukakuwa na baraza, so tukaambia principal na shida zetu, but alikataa karibu zote.
One of the complaints expressed was the packed, busy schedule that compels them to wake up at 4 a.m. and sleep at 10 p.m. And they were seeking a flexible school schedule. They were also accusing the teachers of being too harsh on them.
Napatiananga suspensions over tiny things. Tulisema pia weekends tukiwa tunaachwa free. Weekends tuko na Saturday kuna classes, alafu pia tutakuwa na discussion. Tuko tunasema tukue tu free because weekdays tunasoma and everything, but akakataa pia. Before COVID kuna rules hazikuwa kama after COVID tulikuwa tunaamka mapema kabisa, alafu kulikuwa na hakuwa na remedials, tunapeka remedials, pressure and everything. Like, alafu hizi vitu za D small wakaweka saa C minor. Ukikuwa na below C minor and below naita wazazi, so tulikuwa tuna feel pressured.
Days before the fracas, many students had gotten wind of a possible fire outbreak.
Kulikuwa na rumors, walikuwa wanasema walikuwa na fake chama Saturday usiku, so zile watu walikuwa wanalala. But thank God, watchwoman alikuwa around na I think aliwastopisha. Principal alikuwa ametumiwa letters akiambiwa kama tutaenda half term shule itachomeka. Alafu kuna siku waliandika kwa choo that watoke class 7:30 ama watachoma. Tulikuwa tunadhani at some point ni kweli, ndo after ile kitu ya 7:30 tukaona haikuchomeka, tukasema tu ni prank.
Over 1,400 girls spent the night in the cold classrooms. After the incident, many students were too terrified to sleep in their dorms, which only affected 1 cube of 10 girls.
Hiyo siku Sunday, watu walisema hawezi lala dorm, so tulilala classes.
Mlileta mattress ama
At some point usiku kabisa kitu kaa 2 tuliendea mattress na tukakuja kulala. But before tulikuwa nalala kwa loka chini.
On November 1st, following a long night of uncertainty, the parents were eventually granted custody of their children.
Hiyo siku yenye nilimkujia alikuwa amestuka, hata haongei, anataka tu kulala. Mpaka kwanza nikajiuliza huyu ni kansula nitamtafutia ama ni nini. Walikuwa na ile kustuka. Walistuka sana ni sababu hawajawahi ona kitu kama hiyo.
After a week at home, the girls were required to return to school in phases, with Form 3s and 4 reporting on November 8th and Form 1 and 2 reporting the following day. Each of the 1,446 students' parents was forced into paying 1,500 shillings to cover the damages. Parents with outstanding fee balances were also forced to pay, failing which their children were not allowed to return to school. This was the situation at the Kakamega Boys High School, where students accompanied by their parents were also obliged to clear their fee balances and provide slips for the 9,823 shillings that was supposed to cover the damages. No parent was allowed to enter the school compound.
In fact, it was 24 point around 2 million initially. Then the PA, BOM and the administration, they said they gave each student who lost his or her his belonging, 2 blankets, a mattress and 2 bed sheets. Maybe on my calculation, that came to around 2 point something millions, probably reduced the 24 million plus to 21.1 million. That one is too much. To me, it can build almost a 4-story building, a dormitory like that. For only renovation, they know what they want to build. Maybe a new house, we don't know.
Sadly, those unable to clear the fees were sent back home.
Lakini mimi siwezi nikakubaliana nao juu sina mbele wala nyuma, nilikuwa nisha clear fees. Kuongezea kwa hiyo siwezi ongezea ingine tena.
On November 6, early in the morning, a fire broke out in one of the dormitories, causing 584 students to lose belongings of unknown value. Parents were relieved when the Kakamega Law Courts overturned the fines issued by the school administration.
What happened to the few people that burnt the school? Why is all the 2,200 students being subjected to pay for what they don't participate in?
From the 23rd to the 30th of November, the 2,148 students of Chavakali High School in the neighboring county of Vihiga reported to school, each with 4,050 shillings to cover the losses caused by the fire on the night of November 2nd. Unfortunately, these incidents have resulted in parents incurring additional fees due to the hefty fines imposed on them.
Magoha has failed as a minister for education. Magoha is just stamping. He's not working with the people on the ground. If Magoha was working actually well with all the school principals and the school administration, such things could not have taken place.
That's just the first part of Schools on Fire, special feature by Ruth Sarmoe. We'll continue part 2 after this break and certainly hope that we're going to be turning a new page this year for the school sector. Stay with us. Welcome back. Due to increased school unrest since the start of the second term in 2021, the Ministry of Education was forced to yield to pressure after various teacher unions petitioned for a break in the school calendar. However, a few days into the much-needed holiday, several other schools had already gone on the rampage, damaging property of unknown value. This comes as several students face charges in court, with the government pledging harsh punishment for those proven guilty. In the second part of our special feature by Ruth Sarmoe, she also highlights the issue of safety in our schools.
A week before the half-term break, Kerugoya Girls High School went up in flames on Sunday, November 14th. 42 girls were taken to the Kerugoya Level 4 hospital after inhaling smoke during the incident, but they were later released. On October 20th, the PCEA Kambala Girls High School in Molo went on a rampage, forcing the girls to spend the night in the cold near the Molo cemetery. During the incident, many girls were wounded after tearing down a section of the school wall. And while some students have been arrested, nearly 60 of them have already been charged with arson, possession of drugs and other substances, among other charges. The Karatina Law Court has prosecuted 24 students from Kanjuri and Kiaridhaine secondary schools. After denying charges of attempted arson at their respective schools, 8 students from Kagumo High School and Kianda secondary schools were released on 50,000 shillings bail. 6 students from Maranda High School in Siaya County were released after spending days in police custody for alleged arson. 4 teenagers from Kaloleni's Mnazi Mwenga and Kinarani's secondary schools were released on 50,000 shillings bail after denying charges of malicious damage. 5 students from Kisi's Iterio Secondary School were also released on cash bail after being charged with an alleged arson attempt. These are only a few examples of current cases in Kenyan courts, and the government has promised to punish those found guilty.
Anybody who is planning to burn the building, just remember that if you are caught, you are not going to go to any other school, definitely not a public school in this country. You will go back and ensure that your parents contribute to the rebuilding of the school that you have burnt. We shall charge you, and it shall remain on your record.
At the same time, Magoha has issued a warning to those aiding the attacks.
Be you a watchman for a few hundred shillings, your fate is in your hands.
While sticking to the unchangeable academic calendar, Magoha has stated that he will not comply with the court's decision to readmit trouble-making students to school.
I, as Magoha, son of Magoha, even if such a person goes to court, and the court orders that the principal must admit the child, what do you think I will do? I will not allow the principal to have an infected child to come and infect my children. I am prepared to go to jail for it.
302 students have been arrested since January of 2021, according to a statement signed by Education CS. As of November 11, 2021, there were 126 cases recorded. Similarly, around 40 suspects have been arraigned since then.
Not guilty.
In light of these claims, the government, through the prosecution, faces a monumental burden in court.
They need to demonstrate that they have a watertight evidence. They need to demonstrate that they have done a good investigations to warrant the charges that are presented in court. Without that, then it will have a dead case at the arrival. Yes.
To those found guilty, the consequences of the law awaits them.
If found guilty, you would be entitled to a life imprisonment. And that means that all your lives would end up into prisons. But again, if you're not found guilty, the public perception about yourself would come into play, because all this time they have known you to be a criminal.
Nevertheless, the wave of unrest is not new in the country. In 2016, a total of 239 schools were burned. In 2017, 62 schools went up in flames, with 61 schools burning in 2018, 63 in 2019, and 7 in 2020. While the cases of student unrest are not new, Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers Secretary General Akelo Misori now blames school congestion on the recent 100% transition.
The over-attention given to public boarding secondary schools could be a time bomb, because the boarding sections of our public schools are basically private sections of our public secondary schools. They are not run by government directions, but they are also run according to market forces, where the children or the parents can afford.
According to the Kuppet boss, the increased enrollment has placed a burden on the school system.
With the 100% transition, there is a lot of pressure on the school infrastructure, such that schools which were basically supposed to house about 600 students are currently housing over 2,000 students, where the teachers themselves are not able to know individual pupils by their names. Once the students know that the teachers themselves do not know them, it becomes so difficult.
The whole idea of the boarding school also needs to be re-examined, because what this has done is that it has shifted the home to the school. When we now, at this time, run schools like little prisons, I think it's a big leadership mistake. there should be that space for students to communicate, for students to air grievance, for them to feel they are listened to.
As a result, several schools are considered to have failed to meet school safety standards. The 2008 Ministry of Education Safety and Standard Manuals for Schools require that the dormitories in the boarding schools should meet certain standards, including a distance of 1.2 meters between beds, the width of the corridor or pathway should not be less than 2 meters, dorms should be 5 feet wide, with doorways that are large enough to open outward. The windows must not have grills and must open outward. Fire extinguisher equipment should be operational and positioned at each exit, with fire alarms installed in conveniently accessible location. Similarly, no student, teacher, or parent is immune to the stress generated by the packaged 2020 academic calendar.
One major loophole in the compressed calendar is that there is overemphasis in completing the curriculum, which is basically subjecting the learners to exams. Most of the activities like games, music and drama were all scaled off, because those are the events which were making the school calendar to be overstretched. Teachers are merely coping. It is not very easy, because the whole process of teaching involves around preparations, attending lessons, and then also assessment of what you have taught. So the teachers are under pressure, the learners are under pressure. Those are true, but we are saying these pressures are not only in schools where these incidences have occurred.
Recognizing the importance of a student's well-being, the Ministry of Education has announced the gradual resumption of co-curricular activities and guided inter-school competitions on weekends and after classes. Dr. John Mugo, the director of Zizi Afrique and a policy education expert, says much more has to be done.
We value a lot of score, these grades over health. There's a lot of evidence showing that, especially at that age of adolescence, not sleeping enough yields to mental illness, mental instability. Now, within that age, or if not, if they escape, then you follow them into adulthood, and for sure a good percentage of them will be susceptible to even conditions like early dementia.
While some parents have advocated for the reinstatement of corporal punishment in schools, experts advise against it.
We cannot be the only island that is proposing that we need to incorporate, to bring back corporal punishment. It is dehumanizing.
If you say now that you start caning them, you are now trying to solve aggression through aggression. Just because when you slap someone they keep quiet, it doesn't mean you have solved the problem. What you should ask yourself is, when they are 18 years old and out of school and no one is holding a cane, what is it that they are likely to sustain and able to do?
First of all, we need dialogue. If a child offends somebody, sit down with them, ask them why they are doing that. You talk. Because you may try to beat up a child to give him corporal punishment, and you end up being beaten up yourself.
The solution is to talk to these students, they understand, and you instill that discipline through other means. Because when you cane these people, what will happen, they'll harden. And when they harden, then now they can do anything. So it's better to tell them, talk to them properly, so that they can understand the dangers of whatever you are telling them.
Alternatively, parents have been urged to take an active role in the upbringing of their children.
The society must also take responsibility. We cannot abdicate our responsibility thinking that it is all roses in our schools by taking our children to school thinking that you have already paid and therefore the children should not behave the way they are doing.
Similarly, experts advocate for the reintroduction of guidance and counseling programs in schools, with COPET supporting teacher capacity building through hiring more teachers.
The government must continuously build the capacity of the teachers to address the challenges of the 21st century child, we have got a lot of information which need to be managed before they get to students.
When teachers just interact with students while teaching, then there's a lot happening in their lives, there's a lot happening in their minds that you also need to be knowing.
Alternatively, the union suggested that boarding schools should be eliminated from the educational system.
Many parents prefer them because they want the schools to provide safe havens for their children because of other influences which are there at home. And because parents are not available for their children, that one is now a real challenge. So the problems which parents could be addressing in their homes with their children are all transferred to schools.
With the fires raging, experts think this is a symptom of a more significant problem consuming our society today.
I think there is a huge issue with values, the value system in our society. And this is not just adolescents to blame, because values are learned through observing. When you look at us as a society, as a Kenyan society, you look at what is happening on the streets, vandalism, you look at how people drive, it's all the same, and children observe. Violence and aggression has been legitimated in our society, and I think that should be a concern of everyone. So we may be illegitimately blaming adolescents.
When a fire breaks, everyone suffers. Students miss out on schooling. Parents and the government are compelled to pay for the damage, and students are traumatized. A stakeholder has stated that it is time to take action.
Schools are bound to have issues because we are human beings. But the best way is to deal with those issues the right way. For example, in this school, we have so many means of communication. We usually have, after every 2 weeks, we have an open forum.
There is need for each school to sit down and look at what they are doing about their situation. The fact that your school is not burning today does not mean you are okay. You should not assume that they are not speaking, they are not talking with those other, their friends in other schools that are burning.
Education, as you know, should be an equalizing factor. So when school A has got this provision in their boarding section, and school B does not have, you realize that it brings a lot of inequality.
Every time we have the case of arson in schools, this is what they normally say, that the government will take stand steps. But it is now upon them now to go back to the parliament and introduce a punitive legislations that would shoulder or prevent this from coming up again.
Despite the disruption of the school calendar, the ministry has stated the students would sit for their exams as scheduled.
Do not think you are going to force us to close schools. We are not closing any schools. If you are not studying, it is up to you. Your exams are ready in March. You will take them by the grace of God.
However, tragic fires are not uncommon in the country. On September 2nd, 2017, the country awoke to the news of a fatal fire at Moi Girls High School in Nairobi. The incident, which was confirmed as an arson attack, claimed the lives of 10 girls and hospitalized 51 others due to the blaze. On December 16, 2021, the main suspect was convicted of 10 charges of manslaughter by the Milimani courts in Nairobi after a long battle in court. The presiding judge, Stella Mutuku, reduced the charges from murder to manslaughter, noting that the prosecution failed to prove malicious intent beyond a reasonable doubt. Being all too familiar with such loss, the Kitatas are asking students to consider the ramifications.
Before they think of buying that petrol and coming to burn the dormitory, they should think about the repercussions, the results of the act that they do. Because one, they will kill their comrades, definitely.
They should have good morals. Behavior zao ziwe nzuri na wakienda shule, ni shule tu wameenda kusoma. Kama kuna challenges, they speak out. Na kwa walimu na wao pia wawasikilize watoto, waongee na wawe marafiki.
Wazazi tu ningewahimiza waongeleshe watoto wao, wakuwe na tabia mzuri.
After a long legal battle, the parents of the 67 students who died in the 2001 Changuli fire disaster were eventually paid in 2019. Each parent was supposed to get 857,000 shillings.
Anytime there is rumors of something is going to happen, I think it should not be ignored. It should not be overlooked. It's good to listen to these children.
The courts acquitted the two main suspects, Davis Opio and Felix Ngubao, who were charged with attempted arson. In the meantime, experts have urged the government to teach students firefighting to avoid a repeat of the disaster. The Ministry of Education has expressed confidence in adopting previous task force reports, including those of Claire Omolo, Davy Koech, and Naomi Wangai. Among the measures put in place are enhanced monitoring of current situations in schools, quick tracking of ongoing cases in court, recruiting professional counselors to schools, and the formation of welfare committees, among others. With the national exams just months away, the Ministry of Education says the exams have been set with the disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic in mind. On the other hand, students and teachers must contend with a packed calendar and make do with the facilities available within their institution as the government attempts to improve school infrastructure to accommodate the swelling student population. Experts say that stakeholders in the education sector, including students, parents, teachers, and the government, collaborate to develop a long-term solution to fires in school, particularly boarding schools.